Folks, okay, so here is the timer of doom. It will blink and it will beep and it counts down. It's live, it's real time, and it flashes, so you can't avoid it. And I will be sitting right there with it, so you can't avoid it at all. So keep that in mind. You have 5 minutes. So that having been said, we're going to go through the list here with the first session, the streaming people, and like I said, if you have something to show and to plug in, that counts towards your 5 minutes. So be efficient and quick, because someone could be like talking when they're plugging in, and we don't allow any of that here. So. The projector is not on. That counts as well. That's counting against your time. No. Is there, Brian, can you turn on?
Yeah, don't we get 10 minutes?
No, you don't get, no. Please. All right, so are you guys projecting? Okay, then get up here and we're going to start. Hold on, we'll wait till the projector actually starts up. Brian, can you put it on computer one? Or,
well, what is it? Yeah.
It's a Thunderbolt. Hold on a second. All right, I am starting. There we go. Now.
Oh, it's not going to share it. So, the project we're proposing is called Ossuary KB, and it is a knowledge base.
Yeah. One of the reasons why we wanted to do this is there's such a variety of methods and standards and really cool mortuary archaeology projects that have been going on, not just even in the last few years, but kind of in the history of the discipline in general, but no one place to go for people to share their experiences or knowledge or suggestions. And so we wanted to create a space where we'd be able to kind of show everybody where some of these major cemeteries are, both historic and prehistoric, U.S. and otherwise, and then link them to other reports or forms that people have used maybe. It's just a way for people to come together and actually collaborate and learn and move towards some of this standardization that has been discussed in the discipline recently.
So what we've decided to do is that we're basing this off a WordPress site, specifically with a knowledge base type theme. So everything will be organized into site projects. So you'll have your project, and then you can say whether your project has bioarchaeology methods or new mapping methods or interesting stable isotope data. And it will be organized into categories based on that so that people can, I'll go over it, so that people can see different projects. So basically you'll go in and say, all right, I want to learn a new mapping technique for cemeteries. And you can see different projects and the way that they're using different mapping techniques. Yeah, obviously these are not real things.
What?
Except for this one, that's totally real. So yeah, that's basically the plan. We hope to also have a map-based function in this so that people can actually see spatially where the different projects are. So if they're working in a certain region that has restrictions, so somewhere where maybe the soil is really acidic, so you don't actually end up with certain materials. How are other people dealing with these issues? What forms are they using? What unique methods are they using?
Kind of as a place where people can do a little bit of their own project management by learning from other people's successes and failures. I want to learn about how to deal with fragmentary remains, or we were thinking about block lifting these burials out. Have other people done that? Is that a good or a bad idea, or time and cost effective? So there's going to be a lot of linking, hopefully, to other people's projects that they're doing in here, and a lot of back and forth, and we're going to make sure that we can have some commenting open so that maybe it's a place where people can come together and have good discussions also.
Yeah.
That's us.
Done.
Awesome.
1 minute, 59 seconds,
Yeah.
seconds to spare.
You can look at our twine if you want to see.
Yes, we also
funny.
have a twine story about
No,
our
you can't
vision.
talk anymore. I stopped the.
All right. Well, thank
All right.
you.
Next up is Anne. All right, I'll be a little more forgiving with the transition. Actually, you're giving your 2 minutes.
Thank you, thank you. Hopefully I won't need it. Okay.
All right.
So, my project, I think, is going to be called Banda Through the Centuries. And since 1986, the Banda Research Project has focused on how villagers in the Banda area have responded to, engaged, shifting global entanglements. So the Saharan trade from about AD 1200, then the Atlantic trade, and then British colonialism, and most recently the construction of a hydroelectric dam by the Chinese, which is transforming life considerably. And quite ironically, bringing Banda, which has always been this perceived within contemporary Ghana as a backwater, into the so-called modern world, when obviously it has a very dynamic history. So the project that I'm proposing has a kind of a distributed angsty kind of dimension, as well as a distributed audience. My angst, as you've all heard, centers on the need to share and curate project data, for 30 years worth of material, to do what's possible to virtually repatriate cultural resources to Banda peoples, particularly images, archival sources, along with the archaeological knowledge. And this material is long circulated outside the reach of people in the Banda area. But also to meet the mandate to be an ambassador for the area that the chief and elders laid upon me, or before me, as I was installed as a Queen Mother in the area in 1995. This angst has taken on a new dimension over the last decade for people in Banda who feel their life is threatened by these changes with the hydroelectric dam. So again, this kind of concern to present their history in a way that makes the point to people who are newcomers to the area that they've been there for a long time, they have a deep and rich history. So our project engages diverse sources, oral histories, archival sources, visual resources, and most substantively, of course, archaeological evidence. So I'm envisioning a longer-term project that centers on this data curation. But for the project, the deliverable at the end of this, I propose a user-friendly, public-facing website that's accessible via multiple devices to diverse communities in Banda, in Ghana, and internationally. And the aims of the website is to communicate what we've learned through diverse sources of the area's history, share previously inaccessible resources, particularly images, but we'll also focus on small finds recovered from our excavations. And this will be sort of a virtual museum that aims to tell the story of Banda through the centuries in, again, a user-friendly way. There's a longer-term need to create a digital repository and data publishing that I've talked a little bit to Eric about. So the tools that I envision using as part of this are the Cora digital repository of images, documents, and again, we'll start with small finds. A front-facing image-rich WordPress. I'm not going to build a website from the ground up. I'm going to use the tools that are out there. A WordPress website that uses a device-flexible template, and then longer-term data publishing through open context.
Oh, you guys are super efficient. All right, next up is Heather. Brian, can you switch a date? Where did Brian go? He's got the remote.
HDMI.
Yep. There you go. You're on.
Heather McKillop, Louisiana State University. We discovered a peat bog below the sea floor with wooden buildings from the ancient Maya that's part of a massive salt industry. So, having said that, the Underwater Maya GIS website proposed here extends ongoing field research on the ancient Maya on the coast of Belize to a broader audience of academics, students, and the interested public. The data include 10 years of discovery, here, mapping and excavation of wooden buildings and the associated briquetage, the pots from evaporating brine over fires to make salt, something that everyone needed. The geospatial data are on a proprietary GIS system, GeoMedia by Intergraph, now Hexagon. The proposed project breaks the barrier of proprietary and private access to the research with the expectation of interactive communication. The significance of what I think of bringing the research to a public audience through a GIS on a website include sharing of information on the only ancient Maya wooden buildings, because no others are preserved. Sharing the knowledge of the impact of sea level rise on the coastal salt industry, because the sites are underwater. The Maya didn't live underwater. Sharing the methods, thank you. Sharing the methods of investigating shallow underwater sites. Meeting the requirements for data sharing with federal agencies. Sharing the process with students, since I'm at a public university. And the new LSU accreditation is LSU Discover, undergraduate research. Sharing the discovery, the mapping, and the research with the public who fund archaeology. And most importantly, also linking to 3D printed replica exhibits that we've done in Belize and elsewhere. And is that 2 minutes? Okay. The project will be a prototype or a pilot project using existing geospatial data to evaluate the viability of methods and platforms for expanding to a larger data set already existing and for ongoing fieldwork. The project is based on existing skills that I and my students have in GIS and 3D scanning and printing, and new skills to be further developed, started to learn here. Collaboration with library science and IT colleagues at LSU for programming, and for current and former undergraduate and graduate students at LSU for project management, periodic updating, blogs. I purchased last night a website, underwatermaya.com. The geospatial data will be formatted, I think, on CartoDB from point, line, and polygon data from GeoMedia GIS. I expect problems. Excel spreadsheet data on posts, artifacts will be displayed so viewers can manipulate and see artifacts, posts, distributions, etc. Images and 3D scans will link from web servers elsewhere. I'm going to look at LSU for places. Selected CartoDB maps will be published and embedded in a web page using WordPress. I've got WordPress now. WordPress will include text, images, and videos that describe the story of the discovery, the mapping, and perhaps the excavation. WordPress will include a comment area using some spamware, Google Analytics to track the viewership. Please look at it. The project starts small, showcasing one of our coolest submerged saltworks with nice wooden architecture, with the goal of expanding to a larger database. So I need some platforms that will allow that, and for use for future fieldwork. And I've got lots of issues with data storage and converting GeoMedia GIS data. I don't have shape files. I use UTM coordinates. I want to start small and make it expandable. So I've got I've got 5,000 map posts. We've got excavation data, 10 years of research. And I have about 2,500 3D digital images scanned. It's a nightmare. So I'm really, really excited to be here, and I'll be asking questions this afternoon. Thank you.
I just realized we have a wealth of Kates and Katies.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If in doubt.
Yes.
Yes, just right. Okay. I should be able to get this plugged in. Why is this not going? Oh, this is sad. Where does it go? Yeah, right. No, this is the wrong kind of plug. There, this one.
There we go.
I am technically challenged at times. This is not giving me presenter view. Why is it not doing that? Shoot.
Wing it.
This is
Count down.
Okay. Toss the laptop over. So what I wanted to do was present this in a context. We're all archaeologists, right? And so this digital project and the information that I'm going to talk about here is something that's been published in different ways. It's publicly accessible, and it will potentially, I hope, help manage both secure and public sides of things. But I've been working with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians for the last 7 years or so on this Cherokee Landscapes project. And the idea is to recover a piece of time that's not well known, not well represented in current museums, and yet is what I think and what I'm trying to convince others is this crucial turning point in history, particularly for Cherokees, but also for the way we know the United States today. I can't summarize that in 5 minutes, but and to think about this whole project, I want to introduce a couple of Cherokee concepts. One of them is community. So I see this as a community building enterprise, and not just for the Native American community, for the scholarly community, and for the public at large. So different scales of Gadoogie, and then as part of this act of Gadoogie, it's restoring balance. So balance of information, a balance of skills and ideas and technology, widening that whole world for researchers as well as community members. So the idea is, and I don't have all my notes here, so I may say this not exactly the correct way, but what I want to do is help create an environment in Cora that will organize information, link data and different sorts of different kinds of information, from individual artifacts to collections to historic photos. It's really a wealth of information that the Tribal Historic Preservation Office deals with, and starting with the core of my project and linked information from that. And with that, I also have a front-facing interactive experience through a website of the Cherokee landscape. And so that it would link chronological, so you could experience the 16th or the 17th century, zoom in on particular areas, get to know a town, but see the valley as a whole. So it needs to be multi-scalar and very dynamic too. We don't want it to be a video of telling just one story with one path. And so that people can engage with the information in a very appropriate and very tailored sort of way, that whatever your interests are, you can dive into that information much more. So seems to be a lot of potential of creating this, using GeoJSON and linking that chronological information, drawing from that core database, and presenting it in a very visually appealing way that would integrate historic maps as well as as well as archaeologically generated information. This is it's just an object right now. I want this to be a dynamic experience for people, and for it to extend the learning environment beyond the field school, for it to reach to restore that balance between community knowledge, archaeological knowledge, scholarly knowledge, historical knowledge, and something accessible and meaningful to them. I have a blog that we started this year, and it's this sort of idea of being, the different ways of being Cherokee, but these are blog posts, so it's kind of static and not as dynamic as what I would like. And let me get back to my presentation, I'm so sorry. And so we have a lot of face-to-face sort of interaction with the community. This is a way to make it 24/7. And what a worthy goal for all of us to restore, to have balance of.
I think you're not studiously ignoring
Yes,
the
I am. We're gonna have to get the hook out.
Yeah.
No, I think for all of us, we're giving a voice to people who tend to be marginalized or silenced. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
I like how you ended that there. All right, next up is Kate. Nothing to show?
Okay. Oh.
Hey,
I was like, hey, I saw that. So the purpose of my project is to create an online center for finding, discussing, and annotating public archaeology instructional materials. I've been hearing, and I have friends who have started a smaller version of this via a Facebook and a Twitter group, a Twitter account and a Facebook group. And they got hundreds and hundreds of people involved, but it was difficult to maintain. And that's an issue with a lot of public archaeology link aggregation efforts, essentially, is that it's a static page and people put a lot of effort into it, or it's incredibly limited and it's not very dynamic. And I've been asking a lot of people what kind of platform they might actually want to use, and people have been saying they like the visual aspect of Pinterest but have issues with the citation, and I agree with that. So it would be nice if we had a place that not only dynamically pulled these resources together, and of course I would then be able to say yes or no, is that appropriate, and maybe recruit other people to have accounts to help me to manage that process, but also to self-maintain, to be set up to last. And we've learned a lot about APIs and about WordPress and about CommentPress, which is the thing that allowed Sean's book to be commented on by paragraph, for example. And then Sean showed me something called Hypothesis, which actively annotates the website itself. And then maybe I could turn it into a version of annotation for the website that I'm working on. I'm trying to come up with a way to create a WordPress that is visual, and I think that'll require me to edit a WordPress theme or create one, because most of them are fairly blog-like, and I know this because I have a WordPress site and found them to be a bit limited in their sort of dynamic visual aspect. So I think technically I'm going to need to explore different forms of annotation, how to create or modify a WordPress theme, so that's going to require me to learn PHP probably. And I envision people commenting on what works and what doesn't, and maybe in the future I could incorporate some sort of versioning and forking thing. That's what I'm envisioning, but I don't think that I can do that in the year. So that's the path I want to take for now. And then there's a possibility that I can partner with or become one of the admins of that existing community of hundreds of people already following the public archaeology group, or at least help them out and collaborate with them so that I can leverage what attention they've already gotten and boost their message. So trying to establish a community to actually go to the site, and hopefully by the time we're here next year, they will there will be some sort of version of it that you all can explore and tell me how it's going. But yeah, that's what I'm envisioning.
All right, Ashley?
I'm also going analog.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'm really interested in using augmented reality to recreate landscapes that don't exist anymore. So along that line, I'm currently calling my project Rebuilding Natchez, and it's focused on the 1720s period in Natchez, especially Fort Rosalie, which was a French fort in that area. It's currently owned by the National Park Service, and as you can imagine, it was put in a high spot. It was right on the edge of the bluffs along the river, not a particularly static place. So most of that has eroded away. So actual Fort Rosalie pretty much doesn't exist anymore. It's now at the bottom of bluffs and probably has been taken away by the river. And then in addition, because so much of it is gone, there's not
a whole lot of excavation that even can be done. So I'm really looking at using augmented reality to basically recreate this earlier landscape. And so the sort of purpose of this first part of my project is that I want to create a touchscreen display that could be used in the Natchez Visitor Center so that people, when they're coming and looking at these other historical recreations, can then look at this to kind of see a version of what that landscape might have looked like. So for that, at least, I've currently got a small grant that I'm using to pay a former student to make some of the building models for me. And then I'm already using Unity as a platform to kind of mess around with the landscape and try and figure some of that stuff out. But one of the things that, in talking with the people I'm involved with, that's been a little bit of a struggle is this accuracy aspect. And so I'm going to use the French colonial buildings as an example, but this is a period that's so early. There aren't any existing examples of a French colonial building from the 1720s. There's a few drawn examples of that, but then of course, how accurate was the person who was drawing it being to that. And then there's been extremely limited excavation of buildings this early. So archaeologists and other people involved with interpretation are very nervous about having a recreation where people, for instance, would be able to walk up to a building because of all these different design decisions that you have to make about the materials and exactly what it looks like. So for the second part of my project, or the second aspect, I kind of wanted to take what's seen as a negative, that we don't know these things, and try and turn it into a positive and turn that into a learning experience for people who would be coming. So what I'm going to try and do, or what I will do in some way or another, is you'd walk up to this display, you'd see the landscape, and then over these buildings there'd be an icon that you could then press, a window would come up, and then instead of seeing the visitors being a passive receptacle of this information, you would then basically have something that you'd walk through thinking about the architecture, where you would then make choices about what type of architecture you would want to apply. So as you're walking through this, you're actually creating one of the French colonial buildings. So there isn't just one option, then there's sort of like a few different worlds of possibility based on what we know archaeologically and historically. And so I'm envisioning kind of at least demoing this on a website. I think that might be a little easier to kind of work with and mess around with. But I also am probably pretty much now thinking that I'll actually have a website in parallel, because I think in addition to being easier to demo, that would probably also be easier to add to and probably have a little more rich content. So that is my proposed project.
All right, Megan. You're plugging in.
I got a request from probably the one person who's watching, that people give their first and last names, because they don't know who you are and they can't read your name tag.
Okay, I'm going to start talking.
Use the HDMI, use the other one.
Oh, there it
That's
is.
Matt.
Well,
behind you there.
It's behind, on the ground.
On the
There's
ground.
two separate.
There it is. I was going to connect it to that. Okay. So, I think it's popping over. Okay, I am going to be creating a clickable interface of our excavation area in Petra. I'm calling it Digging Deep into Petra, which is sort of boring, and if anyone has, I'm not good at titles, so if anyone has a sexy title, I'm all for it. So this is the base map that I'm thinking of using. And what I'm going to do is make a map with a clickable interface to explore the results of our excavation area, which is located right about here. And you can see it's kind of nice that there are already other buildings sort of that are known in Petra on the map, so that's kind of helpful to put it into spatial context. So why am I doing this? Well, Petra, as some of you know, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It gets many tourists who, there were about 600,000 in 2014, which is actually pretty low. It was 1 million in 2012 before the troubles started in the region. And they mostly consist of Jordanians, people from other Arab countries, in addition to tourists from the rest of the world. most of these are digitally connected people, particularly the Jordanian and the Arab tourists with their mobile phones. So I envision them being able to access this clickable map through a mobile interface. There will also be a normal website as well. There's very little site interpretation or signage at Petra for various reasons, generally because kids ruin the signs when they put them in, so and throw rocks at them and stuff. So this is a way to have digital interpretation. Okay, and it can be expanded to the rest of Petra as well eventually as sort of a goal, but of course for this project starting off with just our excavation information. So it's going to provide this information to tourists, tour guides, you know, they'll be aware of the site. I'll try to make them aware. Educators, and that sort of thing. What I'm going to do is, and Petra has a 3G signal throughout most of the site, so connectivity generally isn't an issue, but I'd like to create an app where they could actually download the map to their device if they didn't want to, if they were roaming, for example, and didn't want to use data while they're roaming. And what I'm thinking of is something like what I've seen at Jamestown, where they have a clickable map with, as you hover over different features, basic information pops up, and then when you click on it, it will bring up more information. I'll have, photographs of particular artifacts, 3D, 3D manipulated images of these artifacts, and just basically to provide context information about this particular part of Petra. I think that's it.
Katherine?
Oh dear. Does this go in?
No, it's not there. You don't have one there.
Maybe I'm not high tech enough for this system.
It may not be high tech enough.
There it is. I
You
think
got it?
that's it.
I don't see it.
Try flipping it. No,
I don't see it. I don't see it.
I don't think you have an HDMI out.
Do you have a VGA?
It's a
Yes,
regular.
I'm
Yeah, back.
Which
So
one?
take the white one. Take the little dongle off, the white thingy.
It's going well already.
There you go.
Don't
Plug it in.
forget to say who you are.
Okay. After that introduction. Good.
Well, maybe not.
All right. Okay, so I'm Katherine Cook, and I'm coming at this from the realm of historical archaeology and commemorative studies, and I think we have a lot of the same issues that have been coming up this week in terms of preservation and access to data. So recording monuments in itself is quite simple. It's not really that expensive or research dependent, but it is quite time and labor intensive. And what's happening right now is that once people record a cemetery, usually that data just sits in their own database and it kind of dies there. And there's no way to share it. People are repeating each other's work because they don't know it's already been done or it's already out there. And with the number of archaeologists and historians and genealogists and local history societies and cemetery enthusiasts that are out there recording monuments all the time, what's happening is that there's actually a really rich historical record out there, but no one can access it, and there's no way to preserve that either. So the Monumental Archives project, it's looking at creating an open database of historic cemeteries, and it's hoped that this will actually preserve and provide access to existing records, which encourages data reuse and sustainability within this discipline. But also stimulate new research and engagement because, of course, cemeteries, they're not going to be around forever. They are an at-risk heritage resource. So looking at ways that we can actually preserve that data before cemeteries do kind of go the way that they're going in terms of falling apart and decaying. And finally, it's also hoped that this will actually establish more collaborative networks between academic, professional, governmental, and general audiences, and look at what interests all of us and also what the diversity is within people who are looking at cemeteries right now. So right now,
in terms of how I'm envisioning the interface working, it will be an open access website that facilitates engagement and contribution to the database, but it's also going to be kind of paralleled with a more curated collection of projects that will actually connect that raw data to methods and interpretation that's already been done, and hopefully over time that will build up to see actually how data can be reused by different people. The primary website itself will have probably a landing page with an interactive map with pins to the different areas that we have cemeteries recorded for, but then also more traditional systems of kind of searching and drop-down menus and that sort of thing. Looking at probably building it with CartoDB or Mapbox software, as well as kind of a WordPress system probably. On the other side of that, also looking at crowdsourcing as a way of kind of developing the collaborative networks, and people can actually contribute their own data and also contribute to other people's research that's going on, and looking at using Pybosa or crowdcrafting in order to actually facilitate that collaboration. And then there will also be kind of the back-end side of things. And I'm hoping that the database itself can actually be archived and preserved somewhere because I think that's going to develop hopefully into a really valuable resource that can kind of live on. So the work itself is going to be piloted with my own database of monuments, which is right now several thousand monuments from Barbados and Canada and England, which includes inscriptions, locations, material records like stone and style of monuments and that sort of thing, as well as photographs. At the same time, I foresee the next couple of years there being a lot of kind of advocacy work that has to be done in terms of encouraging people to look at open access data in this realm of research, so liaising with colleagues and community groups to encourage them to add to it. So the website itself will have to be designed to kind of start small but be flexible enough hopefully to grow. The challenges that are perhaps more daunting for me is the issue of kind of crowdsourcing and databases. So if anyone has good ideas about that, I will definitely take that on board. And there's my contact information.
Everyone say goodbye to Dan, he's leaving.
Oh, bye, Dan.
Thanks, everyone.
Safe travels.
Okay, I think the
Yeah.
Mac one got disconnected,
Yeah.
right? So can I have some extra
You can
time?
just- Yes.
Which one?
Yeah, no, that.
Was that right?
There you go.
There we go.
Oh, I got you.
Okay.
No. Okay, you're good, go.
Yes. Oh, okay. So my name is Maria Bruno, and I work on the Chaco Peninsula, located in the Lake Titicaca Basin of the Andes at about 3,800 meters above sea level. The peninsula itself has been home to people have been interacting with this wonderful landscape over several thousand years through farming, fishing, and herding. And the Chaco Archaeological Project, directed by Dr. Christine Hasdorf, has been working there for almost going on 20 years now, but there's also even a longer history of people working on some of the archaeological sites in this area. My particular interest in the area is the broader landscape and how humans have been interacting with this really dynamic environment over this long period of time. And so the objective of this project, and I'm trying to keep it really focused for this first year, is, and again, I'm open to suggestions for titles, but something considered paisajes, which is landscapes in Spanish, and this idea of landscape as both a natural and cultural construction and interactions between people, plants, animals, and the natural processes in general. So I want to, in this year, create an interactive web mapping website, probably using the bootleaf template that Katie used for her project, where a map would be displayed on sort of the central part of the site and have some kind of toolbar along the left-hand side through which people would be able to explore different types of maps and renditions of the Chaco Peninsula and explore to understand what those maps reveal about the resources in the area and how people have used them. So we have through both the Chaco Archaeological Project and things that are already available on places like Mapbox, satellite images, topographic maps, and I have, through my dissertation work and other research, collected soil maps, vegetation maps, geological maps that reveal lots of interesting information about kind of the natural components, if you will, of this landscape. So I would like to have an interactive map where a user
could flip through the different types of maps, click on them, learn what those maps are telling them about the landscape, and then learn about how people might have been using those. While I hope that this website, it will be useful for archaeologists and scholars such as myself and the other archaeologists, both Bolivian and North American, that work in this area, I do really want it to be an open source for people of the community, and a growing interest in sort of community tourism in this area and the communities that we're working with, that Bolivians, tour guides, but also the community members themselves could access this webpage to learn about these places. So the communities there already are museums and places, and they're trying to get more tourists to the region. And so I hope that beginning with sort of this environmental layers and maps, people could both learn about where the Chaco Peninsula is. I do hope to have a layer that would show where the more well-known archaeological sites are located, and then, if with permission from the Bolivian Archaeological Institute and the archaeologists that work there, perhaps displaying where some of the other archaeological sites are. But I do want this to be a sort of, I will probably start it in English, but eventually plan to definitely put it in Spanish, because much like the Petra situation, they do have good internet access here, and so any kind of tour group from La Paz could easily make their way here and then either explore these landscapes before they get there, or do them as they are there, kind of giving a richer idea of this really interesting place. And then that would be the first phase in creating sort of the landscape, the environmental landscapes, and then I hope to, in the future, add additional layers that are more cultural as we develop. We're in the process of proposing some new projects that are more ethnographic about the sort of ritual and cultural landscapes. So this would provide the basis for that. Thank you.
Nancy? Are you plugging in?
Yeah, I was gonna try it. I don't have to though. It's just an add-on thing.
Yeah, just
This one?
Yep.
Oh, I'm not sure I've got the right thing for this.
Yes.
Is that it? Does it wanna go? Is that right? Yeah, I don't really need this. This was just like, it might even be distracting. So, oh, my notes. Okay, so I am working on an inventory of the collections generated over 20 years of excavation at historic Fort Snelling. And we have about, in the end, we'll have about 10,000 electronic records for about 200,000 objects that were previously unavailable for research. And my goal, my life's goal, is to make collections data available and use collections-based research more common, and this is a project to really demonstrate how useful that can be. So one of the problems we have is we have a heritage collaborative already going with the University of Minnesota with Katherine Hayes, and the data is going into the collections management database at the Minnesota Historical Society, but she doesn't have access to that. So I'm proposing to put the data from this project into open context where she can work with the API. The outcomes are going to be that she'll be able to start doing analysis, and her students, and the results of the analysis that they get from working with that data will be made available, and this can easily be done on the university or the Minnesota Historical Society's webpage. We'll keep up scholarly communication through professional organizations like SHA and SAA and that sort of thing. But then also, jumping off from that research and doing consultations with interpretive staff at the fort, I also want to be able to take data excuse me, and use it to develop a proof of concept mobile app for the site to show how the data can be used in interpretation at Fort Snelling. And also there's a previous project that generated data that's not, and all kinds of resources that are currently not being used, and so we could grab those and put them into this proof of concept mobile app to show how we can use data and other resources to help interpret the fort. This is really important because the fort's coming up on its 200th anniversary. They're proposing to do a major improvement in the interpretation of the fort. It was really reconstructed to its 1820s appearance, and this is a really important site because we're trying to look at this right up until World War II, when it was not used anymore by the Army. They want to cover the entire time period, and the artifacts could do that in a way that they haven't had access to through other documents. And also, we know that they have not told the story of Native American use of the site and African Americans at the site. And Dred Scott was held at Fort Snelling by the doctor there. So we've been particularly trying to pay attention to any evidence of slavery at the fort. And luckily we have a researcher that's been doing research on Army records that shows that the Army was subsidizing slavery in the military through servant pay, and the cheapest kind of servants to have are slaves, and no one, even in free territories. And so this is, we are starting to see the evidence of that, and this is a way to get that data out there and share it and make it available.
All right, Allison. Source. Oh. Oh, it's gonna go through. Are you plugged in? Are you plugged in?
I mean, there's a thing in a plug.
It's not.
Let's
It's not.
see.
No, is that pushed all the way? Yeah. Unplug it, plug it back in again. I can't believe I just said that.
I can't believe you had to say it to me.
There you go.
There we go. Sort of. Drag.
It's mirrored, so drag it all the way to the right. Like just keep dragging it, and you'll see it'll appear. There you go.
Good times. All right. You can see that just fine. Hi, I'm Alice Lynn McMichael from the CUNY Graduate Center in New York, and I'm a PhD candidate in art history there. My project for this week and this year will be to think about how to change my art history research into usable, cleaned, linked open data. I work on Cappadocian ceilings, which are the ceilings in rock-cut architecture in central Turkey from the Byzantine period, and you can see one here. And I've been working on this for a couple of years at the CUNY Graduate Center, trying to figure out ways to put together my dissertation data in a way that can be part of the wider linked open data ecosphere. I started this at Lawdy, an institute, a couple of years ago, and I've had really gracious help from the New Media Lab and the library and the GC's digital initiatives, but it has been really crucial for me this week to be able to talk about archaeologists and the kinds of data I have and the ways that we collect and use data, and to really think through the issues and the sensitivities that we have in archaeological data. So I really think this has been a turning point in terms of how to think about my dissertation as part of the wider world. And so what I'll do is take my spreadsheet of data, which I'll properly clean and work on with the faculty members here. It will go into open context. From there, it can also be contributed to Pleiades, the linked open data gazetteer for the ancient world that we've talked about a good bit this week. From open context, I can also get the data deposited into Quora. And so, even though the heart of this project is a data contribution, I'm then going to look at ways that a basic data contribution can be visualized for a wider public. So I'll have this proper back end for the long haul, and then think about the ways that it can be useful. And hopefully I'll have the Matrix plugin, Matrix Connect from Quora to WordPress, and then use the visualization tools built into open context as well. So this is, for me, a small data set, a dissertation, but I think the wider implication is that if I can come up with a workflow with a low barrier to entry, we can make this a pattern for people to share their dissertation data and really think about accessibility for digital archaeology on a much wider scale.
Oh. Thank you.
slide it all
Computer
the way
is
to the
named
right.
Thor.
Named Thor?
There's Thor in the bottom right hand corner.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, that's what they all say.
I think it's THOM something. But
Oh.
it's kind
How
of
do you get back to it? I'm trying to. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
All right. So, my project is to create a multi-stakeholder online repository and public-facing interface of pre-contact copper technology in northern North America. I forgot to mention my name. I'm Matthew Pike, a doctoral candidate from Purdue University. I am having trouble coming up with a name. It's kind of bland at the moment, mostly because I'm not sure how scalable I want this to be. So I want it to be generic enough to be able to expand it in the future. So what data that I have is a broad data set on copper technology in the north, including my dissertation material as well as a bunch of material that my advisor and other collaborators have compiled, including site and artifact data, geospatial locations, analytics, such as compositional data, and quite a bit of imagery as well. So the goal of the project, like I said, is to create this multi-purpose, multi-stakeholder interface online. There's going to be two related deliverables. So a back-end of a relational hierarchical database that is at least accessible, if not open, to other contributors who are able to add to the data set and both utilize the big data set and then have a public-facing interface that the general public and more specifically descendant communities, indigenous communities across the north can access as a form of digital repatriation for these materials. So that's my audience. The researchers will utilize this, contribute to it, and that's sort of going to be on the back end of things. The descendant communities are really extremely rural in most instances, and will hardly ever will get a chance to visit these curational facilities or these museums. Travel is much easier in the north than it used to be, but this would certainly increase the access and interaction that a lot of these communities will have with their material. So I have quite a few partners, which is a blessing and a curse, because I've got quite a bit of data and data sharing already happening that we've gathered from all of these curation facilities. There's a number of people working on the project. There's a number of indigenous communities that are interested in, or at least I've contacted and are willing to talk about being interested in the project. But the curation facilities in particular all have different data restrictions on the forms that I had to sign to enter their facilities. So that's going to be a big part of the database. So ultimately, the database is the heart of my project, and this is how I need to connect all the dots. So there's a number of different requirements that I'm going to have of this. There'll need to be hierarchical data security for public access versus administrator access versus external contributor access. Obviously, site locations are important, data to protect, as well as cultural sensitivity to certain objects, things that may be burial related or might be of cultural patrimony. Data linkages will need to link to the front-facing website so that it can be relatively easily updatable and modifiable. There's a number of different data types, so I'll need to have a nested hierarchy within the database. We have site level data, artifact level data, analytics, imagery. So the relationship between all of those is essential. Security and data storage, who can contribute and edit. And like I said, it also has to be easily updatable and scalable, both up and down. So a few of the issues that I foresee, which I didn't have a slide for, are going to be language barriers. So a lot of this data is French data or Canadian data. So French is going to be a language that this should probably be interactive with at some point, as well as various indigenous languages. Like I said, data restrictions, so for institutional and cultural sensitivity restrictions. And there's a lot of requirements that I have of this database. So I really need to manage the feature creep and sort of balance the priorities that I really want to be able to make it function in a easily accessible way.
Julie? Yes.
If I can get the jacket open.
Hi, I'm Jolene Smith. My project is currently titled Archaeology for Everyone. The back end of this is a digital repository with a front-facing portal for the general public for archaeological data in Virginia's inventory, basically focused on gray literature that we have right now. So the main objective is to lay the groundwork for a larger project for a full digital repository for media related to archaeological sites in Virginia. I'm going to be using a Cora backend and presenting to the web with a public website. The Virginia dataset of sites in general is already part of Open Context as part of the DINA project, and so therefore we've got a sort of a framework to move forward with linking the data. So I want to move forward with that and make sure that the material in Cora is fully linked with stable URIs all over the place, and the ability to be very flexible moving forward with the way that we're linking information. And then the other objective is to serve this all out to the members of the general public. Our work in Virginia is usually very focused on compliance-driven projects, very technical. It's not usually geared toward public interpretation through the Virginia SHPO. But this, hopefully we will sort of pay some attention to this very important audience that's been sort of given short shrift in the past. So the content will mainly be a subset of our massive collection of information that we've got right now. So I'm going to focus on low sensitivity, high interest gray literature, and then also maybe include images and catalog supplementary data as appropriate, as sort of a proof of concept. And then the public site will hopefully include image gallery, search, maps, things of that sort, web maps. The outcomes, we will have some digital archiving in place to standards. And most importantly for me, we will have some connections with the non-professional audience. And we'll also enable links to our data by other researchers. And I have identified some challenges so far. First is feature creep, because this could be such a huge project. So I commit to staying very vigilant with project management and defining things explicitly, so the rabbit holes can be avoided. And we'll also be coming up on potential technology limitations within a public organization. So I'm hoping to be very flexible, and I'm planning everything. So if a limitation arises, if there's a security requirement that's an obstacle or something like that, we can move around in another way. And then presenting technical documentation to the public is also a challenge. So creating web content that's accessible and understandable and appealing is going to be a challenge as well. But otherwise, I'm excited. That's
Stacey? Oh, do you want to use VGA?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, then you can hold that.
pull this off.
It's a Prezi, so
Oh, that's a.
is that a bad thing? Oh, maybe I can do that instead.
We won't hold it against
There you
you.
go. Good.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, well, we'll play around with that. So the title of my project is Accessing the Alfred W. Bowers Laboratory of Anthropology's Archaeological Repository. And I work at one of 3 state repositories in Idaho, and it's housed at the institution of the University of Idaho, which gives us resources and infrastructure that other state repositories do not have. The project objectives are of 2 things. They involve 2 things. First, to provide an online overview of the repository's holdings. Please do not go to our website. It's very sad. We have like 4 collections and like 5 photos. And so we're trying to update that for the public. The second component is to develop from the ground up a mobile application and correspondent website highlighting select collections. One of the things I really liked about this institution is that we discussed the why of doing digital archaeology. What does it add to our understanding and interpretation of data? And the why really for us is about the project audience and our project partners. So we have thousands of annual visitors, yes, thousands of annual visitors, 2 full-time staff members, me and the collections manager, and a dozen of project partners who are interested in this data. And doing this project will save us lots of time. Our project partners are diverse in interests and have multifaceted identities. We have faculty who bring their classes every year into our lab space from chemistry, history, education, sociology, anthropology, and a number of fields. We have administrators checking out our facility and questioning our value to the community. We have our project partners coming in, our collaborators coming in. We have undergraduate, master's, and PhD students in our lab every day. We have volunteers from all over the community. We have schools that come in and teachers who expect us to do projects and learning modules around Common Core and learning requirements for the state of Idaho. So we have lots of people coming into our lab, and this will help us out. And all of these people require respect, consultation, and authentic collaboration. So the project components involve, 1, the interactive website featuring open source web maps. I'm going to play around with Mapbox, CartoDB, and I know Esri pretty well. That involve, the map will have clickable icons and pop-up data when you click on that icon. So we're not going to pull in data about the collections. It's going to be descriptive data. How many artifact boxes are there? Who excavated the collection? Is there any ephemera associated with the collection? Site reports, theses, etc. And then the mobile app and correspondent website will feature dynamic, thoughtfully curated data from select collections that are high interest collections, and we're going to try and keep that kind of limited. And then we're also going to feature some information on the lab as an archaeological site. We live in a fishbowl lab, so people stare in a glass box, and we want to provide a little bit more information on what we do in the lab, that we mediate the information that we study as archaeologists. The website issue, we think we're probably not going to be able to host it on our server from talking to Ethan, so hopefully I am going to do some coding and learn how to do this using Bootstrap, GitHub, Skeleton, and other web resources, and I'm really excited to see what everyone else will do next year, so thank you.
All right, folks. So that is the end of the sort of the public component of the streaming. We're going to take a break. And for those who are watching streaming, we're not going to stream the second half because the projects who are in the second half may have sensitive data. They may have collaborators that they need to discuss with and consult with. So we're not necessarily streaming that. So that having been said, we are going to take a break, finish with the streaming, 15 minutes, and then we'll be back with the second component of the project pitches.